Now, first set of images were captured by our buddy, Mr. HEISER. What did you shoot this with?
All these pictures are cha-cha of one form or another. I was in San Diego a couple weekends ago and just wanted to test out my cha-cha chops. Well, it's down along behind where the convention center is, where Comic-Con is held. There's a little area down there called Seaport Village. So there's some of these shots are where I'm walking around by Seaport Village, and there's a few other ones later where I took a harbor cruise. You'll see that in a little bit.
Is this the same area?
Yeah.
Any houseboats out there? People living on these?
I don't know, actually. That one looks like a commercial trawler.
Yeah, that I would think. I'm just thinking of the other ones that were in the background.
Not sure.
And what camera? You cha-chas with what camera? Or is this your phone?
With my Samsung A71.
A71.
Phone.
The phone, right? You said?
Yeah. The shots were mostly about maybe 5 feet apart.
I'm surprised the water looks that good.
Yeah, I was too.
And this is that same area?
Right.
Are you actually cha-chaing? Or how big a cha-cha do you do, pal?
Probably about 5 feet, 5 to 8 feet, maybe. I was going to say it's quite a bit of hyper stereo, but I kind of like it. That's the statue. It's about 25 or 30 feet tall, and it's made from a famous photograph by Alfred Eisenstadt that was on the cover of Life.
When I was studying photography as a kid, I studied Eisenstadt's stuff. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Now this is the statue. Now what is it, painted? Because that's, it's good that you could see the rail down there, because the scale would not be. This would just look like it was 6 feet tall, Yeah. But now you could see it from the banister over there, from the railing. How is it white? What is it made out of?
Well, I think it's fiberglass, and then it's all painted with epoxy paint, I'm pretty sure. This is actually not the original statue. The original was put up there, and then for some reason the city decided to take it down, and everybody complained about it, so they put up another one.
That's it. See, if I was a kid, I'd be looking under the dress. That's just, but I was just.
Oh yeah, they do that all the time.
Well, there's the answer. See,
yeah.
Now I'm good. Now I feel much better.
And right to the right of that, and I didn't include a picture of the Midway aircraft carrier, and that's on the harbor cruise. That's beautiful downtown San Diego, and in the foreground is the Seaport Village where I was walking around.
And did you let the boat do the hyper for you?
Yes, I did. So I don't have any idea really how far apart the shots were, but as the boat was going along, I'd take a shot and then wait a second or two and take another shot. So they were maybe like 15, 20 feet apart, maybe more.
Did you keep up that kind of rhythm with them? Like count out one, count out the other, or you just kind of guessed?
Yeah, quite a few of them actually. I shot maybe 5 or 6 shots, and then I went through and sort of picked out what I thought looked best. This one is a little bit funky, but in the background on the left is the Comic-Con or the convention center where Comic-Con is held, where there's sort of like that tent-looking stuff. One thing I didn't capture, I really wanted to capture, was airplanes coming into San Diego Airport kind of fly right down through between the buildings, and I didn't catch that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I got to do that by LaGuardia, because they come, you catch them coming right down. I did that for a while. My youngest son, I put him on my shoulders once when I was shooting down there, and he said, "Nope, take me down, take me off the." He didn't trust me because the planes came so low. Because they're literally going to drop onto the runway, So he said, "Nope, take me off the shoulders."
Now, there's a little further down along the harbor, there's naval shipyards. And so this is part of that. These are ships that are being worked on, either built or repaired.
There's like a dry dock there?
The one on the left is on a dry dock. It's up on land.
Mm-hmm.
The one in the middle is a helicopter carrier. You can't really tell very well, but pretty much right in the middle, below the crane that has the blue stanchion, there's a helicopter carrier being built. Now, in this one on the left and actually in the left and in the center are floating dry docks, and they submerge those things, float a boat up on it, and then lift them back up again, so the boat is entirely out of the water. And the ship that's in the dry dock on the left is a San Antonio class amphibious transport. Now they bring Marines and equipment up close to shore.
And our dear friend Paul Hutchence.
Okay, well, these photographs are taken in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, which is 8 miles from where I live. And there are 15 national parks in UK. This one is in the north of England. Has a square mileage of about 800 square miles and includes several mountains, highest with 2,400 feet. These, which are often used as sources of leisure for people running up the hills, as a so-called three peaks run, where they go up 3 mountains in one day. It's also famous for caving and for potholing, or I think as you call it, spelunking. Is that how it's pronounced? Spelunking area. So it's a limestone area, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah, I say spelunking. I think spelunking.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm hoping that's right.
Word I haven't heard before till this evening.
Pothole, I'm very familiar with, living in New York. But not that way. But like I said, sometimes the potholes are so deep you could spelunk into them.
Yeah. Okay, so these are rivers. This is a waterfall called Thornton Force. It's about 40 feet high, and it's limestone paving at the top. And these are rivers that merge, tributaries of the River Loon. So this river here is called the River Twist, which merges into another one called the River Greeter, not Greater Thunber, but just the River Greeter, the original Greeter, and then into the River Loon near Lancaster, and then into the sea, ultimately which goes into the Irish Sea on the west coast of Britain.
And what's the source of this?
It's in the mountains. It would be rainwater, but it's coming out of the ground, most of it, or the hills and the mountains behind.
Wow. People swim in this in the summer?
In the summer, yes. And in fact, you can walk behind the waterfall there, but
fun.
It was too slippery. I took these on Monday, and if I tried to go any later in the week, I wouldn't have been able to do it because of the weather deteriorating. It's a 4.5 mile round trip under paths like this. It's quite steep, but it was very interesting. And I got there at 9:15 in the morning, only living nearby. And I was hoping for the sun to come round for that waterfall, but it hadn't quite managed it by then.
And again, this is with, just to clarify, this is with the W3?
Yeah, it was with the W3.
I get
Yeah.
you. Mm-hmm.
And this is another of the waterfalls coming down. It's called the Pecker Falls, Pecca.
Oh, Pecca.
Pecker.
Is that some significance? Is it the town? Is it a thing?
No, I don't know. I've got a lease right
okay.
here,
I got you. Finally, I got you. It took a long time.
I don't know the origin of the names. No.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
And do these pass any towns along the way, or how
This doesn't. It goes through a small village called Ingleton.
Wow.
Where you park to start the walk, and that's a population probably about 400 or 500. But it's a very well-known place for people wanting leisure activities like mountain cycling and walking, and this caving as well, and potholing.
So those, no windmill, no water mills, any of that kind of stuff.
No, not
never
here,
used for that. Never used for that.
No.
Yeah.
That's a good image for both topics, water and waterfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Nailed it. If somebody gets stuck somewhere, I'll interview that. So, and this is the extent, by the way. This is as good as I can draw. This is it. This is all I got. Yeah. So, but thank you very much once again. Okay, now this is gonna be interesting, at least for me. I'll do my best to make it interesting for you. Now it's time for this week's edition of Joe Pedotto's Anaglyph Jukebox, but this is a special one. Right after this segment, we'll be hearing from Dennis Kitchen, renowned artist and mischief enabler, author, and more. one of the founding fathers of underground comics, who is not only an artist, but became a publisher of his contemporaries' work as well, and others who may have been lost to history but for his passion for the art form. And we'll be joined also by Joe Pedotto, the creator of the Anaglyph Jukebox, as we look at some astounding works penned by DENIS, and we take great pleasure in pestering him. So, before we take much longer, are we all set? Are we queued up for this one with sound? Wow, that's helpful. Because, you know, you don't want me narrating any more than this bad. So, I'd say roll them.
Welcome to today's edition of the Anaglyph Jukebox. You never know what you'll find on the old jukebox. Let's press B31. Okay, we've got Will Eisner's The Spirit in 3D. You know you've made your mark in an industry when they name their top creative award after you. The Eisner Award has been given out since 1988 to the best artists, writers, colorists, editors, and more in 31 categories. It is the comics industry's equivalent of the Academy Award. But who is this guy Eisner it's named after? Industrious, entrepreneurial, and endlessly creative, Will Eisner was there at the birth of the comic book business, weathered its ups and downs over 7 decades, and created a body of noir-inspired work that remains in print today and features his single most famous character, Denny Colt, aka The Spirit. Please erase the 2008 Frank Miller film adaptation from your consciousness. The Spirit lives, but only on the comic book page. Eisner's father had artistic ambitions. As a teenager, he painted murals on commission for wealthy patrons and the Catholic Church in Vienna in the 1890s. In America, he scraped together a very modest living painting theatrical backdrops. Will Eisner grew up poor and Jewish in Brooklyn, bullied by anti-Semitic classmates, and began earning a living as a teenager to help the family finances, just as his father had. With his father's encouragement and his mother's disdain, young Will drew for the DeWitt Clinton High School newspaper, literary magazine, and yearbook. He studied for a year at the Art Students League of New York with the legendary artist George Bridgman. His book, Bridgman's Complete Guide to Drawing from Life, published in 1952, has yet to be surpassed. Through the Art Students League, he made contacts that led to newspaper work and $10 a page illustrations for pulp magazines, the direct predecessor of the modern comic book. In 1936, Eisner's high school friend Bob Kane, who would go on to create the little-known character Batman, suggested he try contributing to Wow, What a Magazine. This led to Eisner's partnership with Wow's editor, Jerry Iger. The Eisner-Iger shop was an early comic book factory, which prepared full comics for other publishers like Fox Comics, Fiction House, and Quality. Characters like Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, Blackhawk, Dollman, and Hawks of the Sea were products of their shop, produced as piecework by a staff of poorly paid pencilers, inkers, and writers. The shop's profit was $1.50 a page, and Eisner became rich by age 22. An opportunity offered by Everett Busy Arnold, publisher of Quality Comics, led to the creation of The Spirit for newspaper syndication in a 16-page Sunday supplement with backup features Mr. Mystic and Lady Luck. Quote, "They gave me an adult audience," Eisner said in 1997, "and I wanted to write better things than superheroes. Comic books were a ghetto. I sold my part of the enterprise to my associate and then began The Spirit. They wanted an heroic character, a costumed character. They asked me if he'd have a costume, and I put a mask on him and said, yes, he has a costume. His hero had no superpowers, but that was what made the comic book heroes so juvenile." Though comic legends like Lou Fine and Jack Cole worked with Eisner, his most famous collaborator on The Spirit's comic section was Jules Feiffer, who started working for him at age 17. Eisner, like most of his generation of comic book artists, had his career interrupted by World War II. During the war, Eisner oversaw production of The Spirit remotely, while he turned his skills into training manuals for soldiers, creating PS, the Preventative Maintenance Monthly, which he filled with cartoon features that explained such lively topics like how to fasten down your M30 4.2-inch mortar. Then Eisner had a third career as the creator of the graphic novel format in 1978 with A Contract with God and Other Tenement Stories. The Spirit's best stories date from Eisner's return to the feature after his stint in the Army. Here in the post-war Spirit stories lay the great 7-pagers that make the Spirit the legend it is. The post-war stories often were simply great pieces of urban observation, tales where often there was no crime per se. The Spirit had to be shoehorned into some of these human interest stories. Eisner's narrative and storytelling techniques had evolved to a sophistication that simply outgrew his urban crime fighter hero. Eisner is a visual poet of the city, and urban life was always his real subject.
You know, where else can you see stuff like that? It's really really fun to learn about these people, and I got to admit, I never knew, and I'm growing such an appreciation of the folks behind the pen, and the who can create such wonderful artwork that I've experienced my whole life. You know, and a comic is a funny thing to call. I feel almost funny about calling them or a cartoon. It almost doesn't seem right. I think Will Eisner's the one who called them sequential art, but obviously if they're not a comic book, it's not sequential art. But I like that. I only read that recently, by the way, and I really it stuck with me because it made better sense. I felt more respect for these guys by calling it sequential art. That's just me. I'm sure other folks feel differently, but that's how I. Anyway, Dennis, you're out there. I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Yeah. Hi, John.
Thank you very much for showing up. Really do appreciate seeing you, and I'm going to go through these with you. Stand by and taking the time with us. The dumbest question in the world. What is this? But it's beautiful. But what's yeah.
I call them creatures from the subconscious because I don't really know. These are not planned. I start drawing and they just emerge. There's no preliminary drawing.
Do you put music on or anything in the background?
Oftentimes, oftentimes I'll be playing old blues or jazz, but sometimes it's the news in the background as I'm watching TV. It's I just go into a zone.
Yeah, well, you know, I have a new name for the news I've created. The Asshole Circus.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry if I offended anybody with that one, but it's just my thinking. But man, this is gorgeous. Now, who did the stereo? Who did the 3D?
That was Charles Barnard.
Ah, got it. It's gorgeous. My God, it's gorgeous. And Willie's. Now, how does someone get these? How does someone see this? You have a book or anything coming?
Well, this one says for Stephen. This was a present to a good friend of mine. But mostly I'm doing them for myself. There will be a collection out early next year from Tinto Press in Denver, about 150 of these, but not in 3D. There will be a separate 3D project a little further down the road.
And they'll from Tinto Press. Are they available on Amazon, or do we go to your website?
They will be probably in February.
Second, this is really fun to look at. I hate to push the button to go to the next one, but I'm gonna.
Well, this one's called the Tattoo Artist.
That's great. Are there recurring characters in these?
No, not really.
But there seems to be a technique that carries through, or is it just your?
Yeah. I mean, my style is my style. I'm glad it's recognizable, but no recurring characters. This is separate from the comic book work I do. There are sometimes recurring characters, but these chipboards are truly spontaneous is the best way to say it. I start with piece of blank chipboard and a Sharpie marker, I just start drawing lines, and then something emerges. And at some point, maybe a quarter through or so, I start to recognize what's happening, and then I'm more conscious of it. But the modus operandi for me is I have to start out with no idea and let the subconscious emerge, for better or worse. I like to surprise myself, basically.
Do you leave and return to it, or is it first thought done?
Occasionally, the next day or week later, I might go back and noodle on the details, but not the essence of it.
Better use of a Sharpie I have not discovered in this world, but a Sharpie? Well, like a fine pointed Sharpie? Is that what you use?
It's a combination of a Sharpie and like a ballpoint or a fine point pen. So the fine lines are not a Sharpie, but the outlines and the essential skeleton is a Sharpie.
Do you start with that, with the outline?
Yeah, absolutely. Always.
Look at that.
Yep. I like it because it's bold.
And this brown color, how to get brown? Do you color that in? How's that?
No. That's what chipboard is. The back of a notebook, the heavier piece that holds the notebook together, that's chipboard. It's a recycled board with a lot of particles in, if you look close. So it's a grayish brownish, and that's the surface I love. It soaks the ink in really well. And it's not a term most people outside of printing know, but it's chipboard.
And now other artists use that? Is that like an artist medium?
I'm not aware of anyone else who does this. This is usually a discarded material. That's not at all a typical surface for an artist.
How did you start doing it?
Accidentally. When I had my publishing company, I would be in a lot of long, boring meetings, and I just flip over my notebook and start doodling. And I happen to have a chipboard and a pen, and these things started to happen in meetings, and I just stuck with it. I loved how it felt.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's a nice toothy texture to it.
Yeah, it's.
And keep in mind that these were not drawn with 3D in mind. The 3D came later. So Charles and I picked ones that seemed to have the most dimension. For example, if I knew this one was going to be in 3D, I would have put more tension in the web where the spider creature seems to be stepping. But I wasn't thinking 3-dimensionally. I was thinking of the moment 2-dimensionally.
Well, Charles really did you well on this one, because it's great.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, that's got a special eye and a special understanding of perception to pull this one off, because it's great. Yeah.
So this one's different. This one started in a book that Beehive Books actually the predecessor published. It's an homage to Winsor McCay's Little Nemo. They asked over 100 artists to each do their own interpretation, and so Little Nemo's legendary in comic circles. And I did this one for the book, 2-dimensional. Only afterwards I realized, okay, this clown flying toward you really is inviting a 3D interpretation. And so that one, actually Jason Little did the 3D separations.
Now, is this available? How is this available?
That's a poster. That's available. Anybody who's listening can go to our website, deniskitchen.com. This is available along with, I think we have 4 3D posters that are cheap.
Let me be annoying. Do you, which is just very easy for me, do you autograph these or anything?
I'm happy to if anyone asks.
Yep, well, you better soak your hand. That's really, that's oh, a quick question on the board that you use there. How do you buy those now? How do you acquire those? Is that something?
Going back to the chipboard, I have a friend in the printing industry who bought a carton for me a couple of years ago, and that'll last a while. So, but usually I recycle. Friends who know I use it, they'll just save the back of their notebooks, or Sometimes it's a backer board for various products. So I'll take any donated chipboard. And there are variations then in color and tone and texture. But the Little Nemo was done on a proper illustration board because it was done as an assignment. So this one was planned. This one was not spontaneous.
As much as that ties in, right? Because part of it is your imagination, which is doing that stuff, right? Which is coming up with ideas that get integrated, which is amazing.
Yeah, the idea is Little Nemo would always have a dream and sometimes a nightmare and then wake up in the final panel. So this is, I much prefer a nightmare. They're much more fun. But
now, just for 1 second to go back to the book that's going to be released. So how does that color translate? What are the pages? How does that work? Is it like that color of the chipboard?
These are, well, they'll be scanned at high resolution as they are. So it'll be printed as a 4-color book, but you won't see any bright colors. It's just each of those images has a lot of subtle cyan and yellow and red and of course black. So unless we add color, on a title page or something, there won't be what you'd normally think of as a bright standalone color. But it's a 4-color process. But again, remember, the book that's coming out is just the drawings, not the 3D versions of them. That'll be separate. Charles and I are planning a portfolio of a dozen or so that'll be loose, frameable, whatever. But that'll be a little further down the road.
Either way, it'll be great. I mean, I would certainly interested in grabbing that. And how many copies you said? That's going to limited run, or you said
hasn't been determined yet.
Hasn't been. Everybody, listen to that. Don't buy one. This way, they can figure out how many they need. When we're done, go on the site and is there advanced copies? How's that working? Just to clear some of that part of it.
It's in the early design stage now, so there will be an announcement. I think the publisher is going to solicit it via Kickstarter, so maybe I can pass that along to your association and you can plug it.
Please do, I'd love to. Acid Head, what's this now?
So an old friend of mine, Anthony Smith, is working on an anthology, and I did a trade with him so many years ago, we couldn't remember, and I owed him a drawing, and I kept stalling, and finally he said, can you do a cover for my Acid Head anthology? And so the name Acid Head was suddenly inspiring. So again, this one, Creatures from the Deep, which is kind of recurring. I like sea creatures. And so I should caution you, Charles did this, but it's in process. So what you're seeing is not the finished. It's kind of a half-finished 3D, not as dramatic as it'll be in the final version.
Well, thank you, and thank Charles for allowing us to look at the creative process that way. That's very generous of you both.
Yeah, call it a sneak preview.
Yeah, great. Very nice. I grew up with this guy. No, can you?
This one actually, believe it or not, was an album cover back in 1975 for an obscure Midwest band called Major Arcana that my brother was in. And so I got roped into doing the cover. They weren't really a psychedelic band, but I nonetheless did a psychedelic drawing. And then I later recycled it in an underground comic called Mondo Snarfo. And only then, a third incarnation was this 3D poster that was done in the old-fashioned anaglyphic style by the late Roger May. And that one is out of print. And so it was then kind of punched up a little by Jason Little.
Now that it was done in 3D purposely, or later on?
No, again, back in 1975, when I did this as an album cover, I had no idea it would ever be transformed, but it lends itself, as I hope your viewers will agree, there's layers. And so sometimes unplanned 3D still works.
Oh yeah, I would be hard pressed to believe that wasn't done intentionally, but it's great. I mean, it is done the second time through as 3D. It's incredible. And now that was your brother's band, right?
Well, wasn't
He
his
was in the
band,
band.
but he was a member of it, so that's how I got roped in. Yeah.
Great. Wow.
Yeah. So now this is not me. I published this and the next one. This is an artist named Harrison Cady, who I love. This was done in 1910 in the original Life magazine, when Life was a satire magazine, not the photographic magazine, from the late 30s on. I love his work. And a couple of years ago, I did a oversized monograph of his work with my daughter, Violet, because I just thought he deserves rediscovery. And a lot of what he did, again, just lends itself to 3D. This one is called The Road to Wealth. And you could arguably, other than the fashion and perhaps the style, it still speaks to a lot of people today. It's about the consolidation of wealth among an oligarchy. So 111 years later, still rings true. But you don't even have to look at all the details about money. It's just, to me, an excellent example of what you can do with 3D and comics.
I forget who said it, but I can't recall. I hate to not be able to quote something and not. But it was history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Right. And I should add that the 3D technician on this one was Jason Little, who now teaches at the School of Visual Arts and has kind of retired from 3D, but he's another terrific.
You mentioned your daughter Violet. How is she involved in?
She co-authored the book with me. I had collected Harrison Cady's work for many years, so I had tons of it. But she became interested too. She's a terrific cartoonist and a writer. So when I was having trouble with my deadline, I asked if she'd help, and she helped to the degree that she ended up writing half the book. So she's totally co-credited, and the huge amounts of royalties are also shared with her.
Now yeah, exactly. I got your point. Where can this book be purchased? And again, this is a conversion. Now, in the book itself,
Right.
they're flat. They're 2D, except
Correct.
Correct. Okay, that's
Flat
fine.
in the book. You can get the book. It's called Madness in Crowds, and it's from Beehive Books in Philadelphia. They have a website, easy to go there. I caution, it's not a cheap book. It's $125, but it's huge and it's beautiful, and one of the most nicely designed books you'll ever see. Got award nominations for the design alone.
Yeah, sometimes that's really what it is. It takes money to.
And if you go to the
product. Yeah.
if you go to the Beehive website, you can see a sneak preview of probably 20, 30, 40 of the images inside. So it won't be a surprise what you're getting.
And maybe there'll be a Black Friday, Blue Monday, whatever the hell they call it. But I would go to the site today if I were. I will as soon as I'm done.
Perhaps.
Hey, you're killing my stimulus money, pal. And this one? This is also a Cady, right?
This is also Harrison Cady. This one is called The Road to Hell, and also done in 1910 for the original Life magazine. And this one's poking a joke at the kind of the high-minded religious folks who would think that any small sin is going to, keep you from getting into heaven. So this path, which you see people at the very top are jumping into this road to hell, because at every step, whether it's gambling or smoking or swearing or all the venial sins, will take you all the way down finally to the actual gates of hell, where you're suddenly immersed in boiling pits of tar.
And you meet all your friends.
Exactly.
Now, a couple of quick questions while we're on this. So I think that's. What's the first thing you drew? Do you remember? Do you recall how you got into this?
The first, you're talking about my career?
Yeah, your career. I'm going to that. Yep.
I was one of those kids who doodled in class, who would get yelled at by the teacher, who would say, "Dennis, are you paying attention?" And I'd say, "Huh, what?" Because I would be drawing and sort of paying attention. And so it was something I would say is almost uncontrollable. It was a compulsion. And a lot of cartoonists I know have a compulsion to draw. One of the worst, if or best, is Crumb, who usually walks around everywhere he goes with a sketchbook. And whether he's sitting at a bus stop or in your home or whatever, the pen is out and he's drawing constantly. So that's an extreme. But a lot of us find ourselves, when there's any idle moment, the impulse is to have a pen and to start making marks on paper.
Start making marks. Do you ever make notes of things you want to draw, or you actually start the note?
Occasionally, yes. Occasionally, I will get an idea for something, but I'm in a situation where I can't draw. So I'll grab any scrap of paper, put that idea in the pocket, and then later see if it still makes sense.
Do you have an evolution in your, in the things that you have in your keepsakes that like go from the napkin to the actual?
Sometimes I will save the roughs and they will turn into tighter pencils. And then finally again, if I'm doing a comics page, it'll be carefully laid out in blue or graphite and then inked usually with a brush. And so it's a series of steps. And that's why with the chipboard, it's completely opposite, where there's no forethought, whatever. And I like that part. The chipboard part is dangerous because you can't change a line. If I put ink on chipboard, it can't be erased or altered. Whereas if I'm working in a more traditional style, I can white out, I can erase, I can make alterations, I can paste over. So they're two completely different disciplines, and I like both for different reasons.
Yeah, until you said that, just when you began saying that, I realized the fact that right with the chipboard you can't erase it unless you got sandpaper, I guess. But right,
I haven't tried that.
Yeah, you owe me for that one. Pick the book.
Right.
Anyway, no, really, that was until you mentioned it, I didn't realize the finality of it. So you really are committed to that. That's great. That
Right.
Yeah, that draws from a well in you. That's unbelievable. That's really incredible.
Well, it's like walking on the edge of a cliff. One slip, and so occasionally I will make what I consider an error so egregious that I just toss it, no matter what stage it's in. But 98% of the time, I'll finish them, and there might be a small error I don't like, but the person looking at it probably won't see the flaw I see. So.
And just a few more quick questions, and we'll get moving. How are your archives handled? Who's handling all that? Because I would have wanted. You know how this goes, man. I would want the napkins and the screw up. I would think that you got the point. You don't chuck that, right? What do you do?
No, I'm really a pack rat, and a whole lot of it went a couple of years ago to Columbia University. There's an archivist in the comics department named Karen Green, and she's amassing a world-class collection of cartoon-related memorabilia and papers. So it's good to have it there where it can be studied or looked at by anyone who has a reason to.
No, that is great. And are you the creator of the first? And I'm not sure yet, but of course that's why it's a good question. Look at me, brilliant. The first 3D underground comic. Did you do it, or can you tell us what the first one you?
Yeah, I published it. Don Glassford, who is no longer with us, he came up with the idea, and he just studied old 3D comics to figure out how it was done, because there was no place then. This was pre-internet. You couldn't find a YouTube telling you how to do 3D. So he figured it out on his own. And at the time, we weren't sure how well it would sell, but as it turned out, people who were stoned like to look at 3D images. So it went through a good number of printings and was quite popular.
Who'd have thought that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any formal art training other than annoying teachers by not paying attention?
No, I thought about going to art school, but when I was of that age, there were literally no colleges that would offer courses in cartooning. It was all fine art, and they all looked down on comics. In those days, comics were considered the lowest of the low. And so I decided to go into journalism because my view was I could teach myself how to draw, but the writing skills could be honed through journalism because that's taking information and condensing it in a way that gets to the essence. And so in retrospect, I don't think that was a bad choice. And I began doing comics for the university newspaper. And so that was a great training. But now there's a good number of schools you can go to. My daughter Violet is attending the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont, which is probably the foremost one. But the School of Visual Arts in New York, Savannah, Georgia, the Joe Kubert School in New Jersey. There's a number of them now that you can go to and actually be trained in comics.
And you said cartoon. You said cartoon, right?
Well, comics and cartoons, I'm using interchangeably.
That's okay. So, but the course is in cartoon. They actually say that, cartoon.
Well, it's what you called earlier sequential
art. Yes.
Storytelling, yeah.
But where does, now I'm going to annoy you, and I know I'm annoying everybody because I'm not going to stop. But 2 questions, I promise. 3. There's 3. The first one's going to be real easy because you're going to know it or not. How'd the word cartoon show up? It doesn't make cartoon. Do you have
the word cartoon was originally fine artists in underdrawing. If you're doing a painting, your underdrawing would be in pencil. That was called a cartoon. It's what we would now call a preliminary drawing. And then cartoon evolved to then be what we call, not a realistic intentional image, but a caricature or a reduced version. Anything that's a simplified line art, we tend to call a cartoon now. And
simplified line art.
Yeah. And again, not all of it's simple. You saw like Harrison Katie as an example. I mean, in other words, it can be quite detailed, but
conceptually,
right. You're not looking at perhaps a better way to put it would be a non-anatomically correct depiction of people, animals, and things, more impressionistic. I mean, I consider myself a cartoonist / surrealist because I feel like I think like a surrealist, but I'm not painting like a Magritte or a Dali. And while I am a cartoonist, a lot of what I do deviates from what would be, say, marketable cartoons. These chipboard would be an example. It's a cartoon, but it's not telling a story. It's kind of uncategorizable.
I can see how it got the comic because then funny papers, right? The funny whatever.
Yeah.
I guess it modified into a comic because it's an odd thing to call.
Right. Although comics also covers realistic. I mean, you could have horror comics, war comics, things that aren't remotely humorous, and comic still applies to that. And it's a misnomer, obviously, but no one's come up with a better term that's caught on or been catchy. You mentioned Will Eisner came up with sequential art, but that's more of a mouthful. Comics is just
I agree. But you do sound it does make it sound smarter though. It does make it sound smarter though. Sequential art.
It does.
And then you pull out a comic book. It's fucking great. Excuse me. Sorry.
I was impressed with your homework, John.
Oh. I do the best one I got.
With underground comics, we changed the CS to an X. So the X implied that they were, more raw than your newsstand or newspaper comics. And so that's another variation that gives you a sense of what the content is.
And before we head on to the other questions, which we'll go on to the next thing, what do you think the future holds in store for comics, line art, sequential line, all of it? Where do you think it's going?
Well, it's dangerous to predict, as you know.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, I think the internet's been a great thing that allows a lot of artists to get their work in front of an audience without having to have the revenue to print something. Publishing's an expensive venture. I mean, even though you do have print on demand, you can do a handful of your books if you want, relatively low cost. But I think a good part of the future is going to be what the internet offers. There's going to be augmented comics where you might have a portion that's animated, and so you'll have a combination of a traditional comic and animation. Also, you could have sound effects. So there will be hybrids yet to be determined.
And I see Charles. Thank you for that answer. I think maybe in the VR world, and there's a lot of stuff. Can you turn Charles Barnard's? Can we get him to? I realize you're there, and I'm so sorry for there were so many of these questions I would love to have.
Charles is with us.
Charles is with us.
Excellent.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, Charles.
Hi.
Yeah. So I only realized you were there. I would have brought you in a little earlier. Sorry about that. But
Oh,
yeah. Great work, man. Oh my God. But we've spoken before, and we've shown you incredible work. How do you get that perception? So now, what well do you draw from? Because you do such a wonderful job. That's like a built-in skill. I mean, it's not even a skill. It's a blessing. What you do there is so incredible. Yeah, people can't just do that.
It's a miracle. Right? It's a miracle. Well, in my case, everything when in conversion, really everything comes down to the drawing. So, and I think you can choose to take a point of view on it if you want, but when working with someone's art like Dennis in particular, where you're dealing with really a very surrealist kind of drawing style, you don't want to do anything that's trying to create your own statement. The goal really is to work within the original drawing and capture that feeling. And my only job really is to bring it into some sort of three-dimensional depth. In many ways, I view myself as less of an artist and more of a technician, to be quite honest with you. There's also a lot of collaboration. Dennis has a lot of experience with 3D. Obviously, it goes back for a few decades, and he's a big fan. He's got a good eye. So, in preparing images with him, there is a lot of give and take, even though, generally his acceptance was always very high. I always wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something or putting focus on the wrong thing in depth, because a lot of things do change. When it goes to depth, you can make things that may not necessarily have been intended to be in the foreground. They can be in the foreground. So there's a lot of interpretation and just kind of making sure you're staying true to the original artist's vision.
Now when you see it, when you get a thing like this, what are you seeing? And that's flat. Okay, that was flat. Now how did you turn it into such a,
Well, the one you're showing was a particularly challenging one. As Dennis cited, the web itself wasn't really designed to be in 3D. So it took me a few attempts to find a compromise that would allow the spider to actually look like it was making contact with the web, while at the same time not overplaying the web too much, because obviously we want to concentrate kind of on what the spider's doing with the victim. And even though that can clearly be moved to the front, the web was problematic. It took a few passes for me to find a way to give it some depth, when really it is a very flat item. It's kind of drawn flat. Dennis cheated a few things because he could, it's a 2D cartoon. He can draw anything he wants, anywhere he wants. So for me, there was some challenges with it, but I was generally happy with how it came out in the end. It felt about right to me. Looking back at this now, it's been a while since I've looked at it. I think I'd have pushed a few things even more. I think I would push that nose and tentacle nose and hand and everything. I'd really thrust it out there, but in general, I'm pretty happy with these chipboard conversions. I think may be some of my best work to date, actually.
Well, that says a lot. So Dennis sends you a scan of this, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So a high resolution scan. And then how long would it take you to create something like that? I mean, just roughly.
Well, the chipboard drawings were, again, it was a bit of a process. When he first approached me with the idea, I wasn't even sure if the chipboard, that cardboard texture itself, was going to work or whether it might interfere with the 3D. And the happy the happy surprise was the chipboard texture itself actually helps with ghosting. So it gives you, because it creates a lower contrast environment. But what I had to do is I have to scan, he sends me the scan of the chipboard in very high resolution. I actually have to separate out all the line work. So I remove that chipboard texture so that I can do the conversion, and then I reintroduce the chipboard texture afterwards. So it is more labor than the average black and white line drawing, but we've been really happy with it. I felt really good about it when I sent the first initial roughs back to him, that everything seemed to be working well. I even set up my my printer so I could print actual size prints that we're thinking about doing, and I'm able to send those to him so he could take a look at it, and it seems to be working quite well.
The one last question. I'm like Columbo. Just one more thing. So you do you break this into like how do you begin on a thing like this? You break it into quadrants, or you how do you start that process? Like what, you know?
That's a good question. Basically, everything is done in Photoshop. In fact, I would say everything you're looking at from me here today has been done in Photoshop. And the basic process is you start from the foreground and work your way back, and you start cutting the original drawing into Photoshop layers. There's a lot of layers here. In the case of these examples, there's probably 300 to 400 layers easily. But then I have to go back. I actually, shift the layers to create a right eye view. And then I have to go back in Photoshop, and I use a variety of distortion techniques to actually create a sense of volume. The roundness, for example, you're perceiving on the head of the spider, all of that is created using a variety of scripts and tools I've written for Photoshop that allow me to actually follow the contour of the object and force it to create that sense of volume. Otherwise, it would have to be a series of chopped layers that are stacked on each other, which is fine. And some conversionists are very successful with that method. For me, I tend to use the chop up to get those basic elements in place, and then I use distortion techniques to give it volume and roundness.
And at the same time, are you sending it back to Dennis, or you send him the finished product?
No, Dennis is an easy guy to work with. So it really was a matter of, once I established an initial rough, before I even do the rounding, I just kind of show him where the thing looks in space, what the primary planes look like. He's got a great eye, so he's able to read it, look at it, and go, great, I can't wait to see it finished. And then I just finish it out from there. But it does take me a long time. I'm oftentimes putting his work in between other work. So he's been a really patient guy. It's been very slow going.
I should add too that sometimes, like in this case, we decided the eyeballs should be white. They weren't drawn white, but it was a mutual decision to emphasize the white.
Yeah, that was a great idea. Yeah, you decided to do that pretty early on, actually. We have white pops that we did on various features on all of the chipboards, which really helps kind of accentuate and bring out, particularly eyes and teeth. It just gives us that additional contrast and interest.
You know what's so great about this, other than it's great, is that, even if anyone, when people buy the book, see, even if I looked at it flat, I've already perceived it as stereo. Like I'll always remember this that way. It's like, it's incredible.
Well, and I have to say, when I started becoming a fan of 3D, we all remember how simple it was, where you'd have 4, 5, 6 obvious layers, like one fence behind another. And what Charles does, I call a CAT scan, the way a medical technician will slice something into, infinitely thin slices so you can see what's going on inside a bone or an organ. That's the only comparison I can think of.
That's a great clarification, by the way. I'm sure that really sunk into everybody's head what you said. That really takes it. it's much more understandable. Not that you weren't understandable, Charles, but that really no, that was great. That really made it very understandable.
Dennis will always have me beat on explaining things like this. Trust me.
That is, again, thank you. I could go on for 2 hours, but we do have to move ahead. It's painful to actually. I enjoyed this so much. You guys were so generous. Now you know what, Columbo. And one last thing. Just I promise. Look, fellas, I promise this is going to be it. Is there any artist that we should be looking at that you see coming along that deserves some attention?
We should plug the book that Charles did with Jim Woodring. There's a wonderful book, Jim's character Frank, that came out in a book from, I think, Fantagraphics. The pages are really thick, like a child's primer book. It's wonderful, just amazing. So if any of your viewers aren't familiar with it, they should check that one out.
Yeah, I was moving stuff out, looking for the other book. I just moved that. Yeah, it's a great book. Actually, you'll laugh, Charles, and then I got a good friend I grew up with named Frank. He was in a band with me. I sent him that.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Years ago. I'm sorry I didn't keep the other copy, but no, I do have one. I would, because they're hard to find.
Well, they're a little hard to find now. It's been out of print for a couple years now. So, you can occasionally find one on eBay, depending on the market. They can go at pretty premium prices. I'm seeing them at $400 to $600 for a copy.
Jeez.
If I'd have known that, I would have never sent that to Frank. But nonetheless,
right.
He's a good friend, but not that good.
Well, and just after the book came out, I had the pleasure of going to the book signing with Jim himself, and he was randomly signing these. I mean, he can crank out, and a cartoon. He'll throw in a cartoon too. So he was cranking out a ton of them, and I'm just thinking now, you just don't know what the value of these things could be. So
yeah, I after you guys, I realized I needed a right-hand man. I needed a guy who was hanging out with me who was a cartoonist, because that would just made my life so much better. Really, that was the only improvement. Nothing else would have changed, but that would have done it.
Well, you should John, you should have that stick man you drew earlier. Have Charles convert your stick man. Now that'll be a test.
Yeah,
that'd be a challenge.
I like
a challenge.
That's it. And now I realize that I should know how to take it up a notch with Charles. That's excellent. Well, again, I want to thank you guys, and we're going to now move on. It's painful as it is. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for all the great work you did and the inspiration you give so many people.
Thank you for including me. I wasn't expecting this. I'd have worn a real shirt.
You look great, and thank you. And also, there's a podcast we did with you, so if anybody wants to listen to that with Charles, thanks again. Yes, I'm sorry. And Joe, for some reason, I please don't feel bad. I was moving along here. Do you want something that you want to say something, Joseph? I'm so sorry.
I'm just thrilled that Dennis and Charles were able to participate this way. I would just mention to Dennis, and maybe I'll send you a link. Charles knows this. We did an Anaglyph jukebox on Frank and the Third Dimension, and my esteem for that, knows no bounds. It's on the back cover, isn't the phrase volumetric 3D used? And I think that's a good term for that CAT scan like approach that you have, because as I think I mentioned in an email to Dennis, I grew up with ViewMaster, so I knew what 3D was, but I wasn't blown away by 3D until I saw the 1966 reprint of the early 50s Batman comics. It was a tie-in for the TV show. And again, it was just as Dennis described. It was like a series of fences. It was the cardboard cutout silhouette effect, but somehow that impressed me more as 3D than even the natural vision of ViewMaster. And it's been a great pleasure of my life to see it go from where it was, Charles, to what you do with it, and then the amazing collaborations that you've done with Dennis. Dennis, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, this was great. Thank you.
And Joe, thank you so much for introducing us, because as clever as I am, I would have never found these guys and these wonderful artists. And you actually you got that to happen. And wow.
Well, it was really, John, it was really hard. All I had to do was ask them.
Yeah, it's always that way. Knowing who to ask is the kicker.
Oh, okay, that's hard part.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. No, I'll give you a lot more than that. If not for the Anaglyph Jukebox, it led us all into this. So we've seen Frank in 3D. So everyone's touched on that, so they know these great artists and what their potential is, and that's came out of you, Joseph. Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. And but the greater gratitude should go to DENIS for keeping people like Will Eisner in print for all those years, for decades, and for like a passion project, reintroducing Harrison Cady to the world. These are important steps.
They are, and yeah, yes, thank you for that, because I'm certainly going to go get those books. There's no doubt about it. Now that I'm taking stuff out of the bookshelf, I may as well stick a couple more in. I made space. You all know what that's like. Yes. Again, thank you. So now we're going to head over to. Are we all queued up, Mr. Heiser? We're going to the next to the last interview with Dr. Brian May, and I'll see you right afterwards. Are we ready to go, Dave? Roll. Now, what was the first stereo card? I got to go to that point. What was the first one you saw and begin this process? I'm just dying to know that.
Well, the magic happened for me because of Weetabix. Weetabix, when I was a boy in the early 1950s, used to give away toys. All the cereal companies did that. You would open the packet and out would come a toy, like a plastic plane or soldier or an Indian or something to me incredibly exciting. And one day, out of the packet of Weetabix came a little card like this in a cellophane bag, and it had two pictures of a hippopotamus. And I thought, oh, that's very nice. What does that do? And it said on the back of the card, send away 1 and 6pence and a packet top of Weetabix, and we will send you the viewer so that you can see this in 3D. So I did. In the post, a few days later, in came the thing. I put the card in the viewer, and bang, it popped out. There was the hippopotamus, not looking flat anymore, but looking like I could fall into his mouth. I could almost like smell his breath. And I freaked. I remember my mum was there in the kitchen. I went, this is amazing. Why didn't this happen all the time? If photography can be this real and this well, I didn't know the word immersive in those days, but if it can be this, if it can have this effect on you, why are people not doing this all the time everywhere? Funny thing was, I didn't know it, but as a boy in the 1950s, I was just coming out of the period where stereoscopy was cool. You had all that stuff going on in 1950 with the stereo realist. I'd never seen a stereo realist camera, and it was years before I found one of those, and I'd realized that this whole kind of craze for stereo had been going on when I was a kid, and I wasn't really aware. By the time I was out on the road, like with Queen, looking for stereoscopic viewers and cameras and projectors and stuff, it was all history. It was like defunct. There's only a few places I could find. A wonderful place in Chicago. I'll never forget Bell Park Photo. And I had a great friend there. Every time we went through Chicago, I'd go down there and he'd find all these beautiful things like TTC projectors, rare Eloka cameras, all sorts of beautiful stuff. And to me, it was magic. There was as much magic in there as the music. I mean, it was just a whole world that was opening up to me.
Who like, that's a good point. You were meeting other musicians, other artists on the road. Did you have a viewer with you? What was their reaction? Did you inspire any of those folks to pick up a camera?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, notably John Deacon, he got into it. He was into all sorts of gadgets and things, and he liked the stereo stuff. And when we went to Japan, he bought himself a stereo adapter for his Pentax. I think we all bought Pentaxes first time we went to Japan. And he got into it, yeah. So he took quite a lot of stereoscopic photos, including he covered my wedding, my first wedding, I should say, in 3D with a stereo realist. Yeah, and people generally were impressed. Freddie liked it. Freddie enjoyed it. Freddie liked his Polaroids. Freddie was so impatient; he wanted to see it now. And of course, in those days, 35mm film wasn't instant. You had to wait till it came back from the processors, and you're biting your fingernails, hoping that it hadn't got messed up, or the shutter hadn't stuck, or it didn't get lost in the post. Freddie didn't. As soon as Polaroid came along, Freddie loved it. He just wanted to take his picture and show it and be in it and communicate with it right that second. I've got a picture in my Queen in 3D of him taking a picture of me with that Polaroid camera. I wish I had the picture he took, but somebody has it probably. But so I was taking him in 3D, and he was taking me in his.
I've searched for, I've requested, and no one. You would think that Jimi Hendrix, somebody would have taken, of all the guys. I mean, now you can do obviously a conversion, but of all the people, like, why didn't anybody just point the 3D camera at Hendrix? I'm always amazed that you can. I've asked so many people, nobody can ever find that.
You know what I could have done, because I saw him in those days. I could have done, and for some reason I didn't. I don't know why.
Yes.
Yeah, in your life you come and go with things, don't you? And I think I was so immersed in the music at that time. I remember watching Jimi Hendrix at my college, coming out of the changing room over here, walking across this little hallway to the stage was here over here, and the words he said were, "Where's the stage, man?" And none of us answered because we were all like tongue-tied. We went, and I didn't have my stereo camera with me. I guess, why would I? I suppose I'm much more involved in the moment. But I mean, these days I would.
This guy. It's his birthday today. Started out that guy, became that guy. Well, that was quite. Look, I'm right in the middle. You know, there's young Hendrix. But isn't that funny? That's his expression, because Hendrix did that to folks. Whether you like that in his music or not, he was a game changer for all of us. If you're a musician, it's a different touch. I mean, if you like his music or not, but a musician does, because a musician could look in, man, and I'll tell you, any musician will go, "What the hell is that guy doing? What?" He's like. It's from another planet. But that was a lot of fun. So today first I'm gonna thank everyone. Thank Paul Hutchence, Dennis Kitchen, Charles Barnard, Joe Pedotto, my great crew who works with me at. I was gonna. That's a good point. Hi. Yes, but he's part of the crew. But yes, Dave HEISER. These guys are really work. We work all week to get this to happen. There's constant emails, and we have 2 meetings a week. I said it all the time, but it really means something because they really care about you. They're really very, very interested in making sure you get a quality program. So I'm going to end today by quoting some Rudyard Kipling with a passage that was in the last letter that I got from Sir Arthur C. Clarke 2 weeks before he passed. And it goes out to all creators, whatever they create. Art, song, books, families. Here's a big moment. You're going to get Johnny Laser reciting Rudyard Kipling. If I have given you delight by aught that I have done, let me lie quiet in that night which shall be yours anon. And for the little span the dead are born in mine, seek not to question other than the books I leave behind. Thanks for stopping by to see what you've been missing in 3D. Stay tuned for the after party with Dave Comeau. I'm headed into the VR world and will return when they chase me out. Share your kindness, count your blessings. See you later.